Step into History Page, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings timeless mysteries to life. In the golden glow of Davenheim Hall, a wealthy financier vanishes without a trace. A bloodstain on the rug, an open safe, a shadow in the garden. What secrets lurk behind the polished smiles of its guests? Was it murder, a cunning escape, or a betrayal hidden in plain sight? Join Hercule Poirot, the master of the little grey cells, as he unravels a web of lies, greed, and deception in a mystery where every clue counts, and the truth is a mirage waiting to be shattered. Who can you trust when everyone has a motive? Chapter 1. The Mirage of Davenheim Hall. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Davenheim Hall, a sprawling Georgian estate nestled in the heart of the Kentish countryside. Its honey-colored stone facade gleamed with an almost ethereal glow, as if the house itself were reluctant to surrender the day's warmth to the creeping dusk. Captain Arthur Hastings, retired from His Majesty's army and now a man of leisure, stood at the edge of the gravel drive, shielding his eyes against the glare. The invitation to spend a weekend at the estate had come unexpectedly, borne by a crisp letter from Mrs. Cecilia Davenheim, wife of the reclusive financier, Mr. Philip Davenheim. Hastings, ever susceptible to the charms of a country retreat, had accepted with alacrity, though he could not shake a vague sense of unease. The air was thick with the scent of roses and freshly cut grass, yet beneath the idyllic surface, a subtle tension simmered. The guests, a carefully curated assembly of society's curious and ambitious, milled about the terrace, their laughter and conversation punctuated by the clink of champagne glasses. Hastings observed them with his usual good-natured curiosity, noting the impeccable tailoring of the men's suits and the elegant sweep of the ladies' dresses. Yet something was amiss. The smiles seemed too fixed, the glances too guarded. At the center of the gathering, and influence, was known for his shrewd dealings in the stock market. Rumors abounded of his uncanny ability to predict market shifts, though some whispered that his methods were not entirely above board. Hastings, however, had little interest in financial matters. His attention was drawn to the other guests, each of whom seemed to carry their own secrets beneath their polished exteriors. There was Mr. Leonard Grayson, a barrister with a reputation for ruthless ambition, his sharp features softened only by the occasional wry smile. Beside him stood Miss Evelyn Carver, a young heiress whose delicate beauty belied a keen intellect and a rumoured penchant for gambling. Dr. Harold Whitby, a physician with a penchant for amateur botany, hovered near the edge of the group, his eyes fixed on the rose garden as if it held some hidden truth. And then there was Mr. Victor Langston, a brash American industrialist whose booming laugh grated against the refined atmosphere, his presence a stark contrast to the understated elegance of the others. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the terrace into twilight, a sudden commotion erupted from within the house. A maid, her face pale as chalk, burst through the French windows, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Davenheim! Oh, madam, it's dreadful! Mr. Davenheim, he's gone!" "Gone?" Mrs. Davenheim's hand flew to her throat. "What do you mean, gone?" "He's not in the library, madam. The safe is open, and there's blood on the carpet." A collective gasp rose from the guests. Hastings felt a chill run down his spine, his military instincts sharpening. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Davenheim, perhaps I might be of assistance. May I see the library?" She nodded, her composure fraying. Yes, of course. This way." The library was a grand room, lined with oak shelves heavy with leather-bound volumes. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center, its surface lit. "Such a mystery." "Mrs. Davenheim," he said, "I know someone who can help. A friend of mine, a detective of unparalleled skill. If anyone can find your husband, or what happened to him, it is Hercule Poirot. Mrs. Davenheim's eyes lit with a flicker of hope. Poirot? The Belgian detective? Yes, I've heard of him. Please, Captain, send for him at once. As Hastings dispatched a telegram to London, the guests dispersed, their voices hushed but urgent. The tranquil beauty of Davenheim Hall had been shattered, and in its place hung an air of suspicion, as thick and inescapable as the evening mist. Somewhere within these walls, or perhaps beyond them, lay the truth about Philip Davenheim's disappearance, a truth that only the little gray cells of Hercule Poirot could uncover. Chapter 2. The Vanishing of Mr. Davenheim. The library of Davenheim Hall, so recently a haven of quiet industry, now bore the oppressive weight of calamity. The crimson stain on the Persian rug, stark against the intricate patterns, seemed to pulse with accusation in the flickering lamplight. Captain Hastings stood near the open safe, his brow furrowed as he surveyed the scene. The guests had retreated to the drawing room, their voices a low murmur through the heavy oak door, but the air in the library was thick with unspoken questions. Mrs. Cecilia Davenheim, pale but composed, stood by the fireplace, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief as she awaited news. The local constable, a stout man named Perkins, had arrived promptly, his notebook clutched like a talisman against the chaos. He scratched his head, peering at the bloodstain with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. "Never seen anything like it, sir," he said to Hastings. "Mr. Davenheim gone without a trace, and this blood, well, it don't look good, does it?" "No, Constable, it does not," Hastings replied, his tone measured. He glanced at the name. The door swung open, and a small, impeccably dressed figure stepped into the room. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his mustache waxed to perfection, surveyed the scene with bright, bird-like eyes. His presence, though diminutive, commanded immediate attention, as if the very air rearranged itself to accommodate his authority. "Mon ami Hastings," Poirot exclaimed, his voice rich with warmth. "You find yourself once again in the midst of intrigue, n'est-ce pas? And Madame Davenheim, I presume." He bowed deeply, his manner both courteous and commanding. "Hercule Poirot is at your service. Now, tell me, what is this calamity that has befallen your household?" Mrs. Davenheim recounted the events with remarkable composure, though her hands betrayed her nerves, clutching the handkerchief until her knuckles whitened. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted slightly, his fingers steepled before him. When she finished, he nodded, his eyes already darting about the room, taking in every detail. The open safe, the scattered papers, the bloodstain, the half-empty brandy glass. "Most curious," he murmured, stepping toward the desk. He bent to examine the papers, his gloved fingers hovering just above the surface. "Financial documents, oui? And the safe, it contained, what precisely?" "Philip's most sensitive papers," Mrs. Davenheim replied. "Contracts, stock certificates, and a considerable amount of cash. He was preparing for a major transaction tomorrow." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this cash, it is gone." She nodded, her lips tightening. "Every pound." Poirot turned to the bloodstain, crouching with surprising agility for a man of his age. He studied it closely, his nose nearly touching the rug. "Fresh, as you say, Hastings, but not so much as one might expect from a fatal wound, none? It is suggestive, this blood. Suggestive of something other than murder. First, I must examine this room further. Hastings, mon ami, assist me, if you please." Together they combed the library, Poirot's methodical precision a stark contrast to Hastings' more instinctive approach. Poirot paused at the brandy glass, sniffing it delicately. "Curious," he murmured. The scent is not quite right. And see here, Hastings, the glass. It is smudged, but only on one side. Most peculiar." He moved to the safe, noting the absence of any signs of forced entry. "The combination was known only to Monsieur Davenheim, oui?" he asked Mrs. Davenheim. "Yes," she confirmed. "He was very particular about it." Poirot's gaze lingered on the French windows, then shifted to the rug, where a faint indentation caught his eye. He knelt again, running his fingers over the fibers. A chair, perhaps, moved slightly out of place. Or something else, something heavier. As the clock struck 8, Poirot straightened, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. The picture begins to form, but it is not yet complete. "Madame, I will speak with your guests tomorrow. For now, I suggest we retire. The truth, it does not run away, but it hides, and Hercule Poirot will find it." As they left the library, Hastings caught a glimpse of the terrace, where the guests stood in hushed conversation, their faces shadowed. The disappearance of Philip Davenheim was no ordinary crime, and already Hastings could sense the intricate web of motives and secrets that Poirot would soon unravel. But for now, the night held its secrets close, and Davenheim Hall seemed to watch in silent judgment. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Davenheim Hall, casting a golden glow over the breakfast room where the guests had gathered. The table was laden with silver dishes of kedgeree, toast and marmalade, yet the atmosphere was anything but convivial. Circumstances. Hercule Poirot is here to bring order to this most distressing affair. Mrs. Davenheim, seated at the head of the table, rose to greet him. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed, but she maintained an air of composure. "Monsieur Poirot, we are grateful for your presence. This uncertainty is unbearable. Have you any news?" Poirot inclined his head, his expression inscrutable. "News, madame, comes only when the facts are arranged in their proper order. For now, I require only your cooperation, and that of your guests." He took a seat, accepting a cup of tea from the butler, Mr. Simmons, whose hands shook slightly as he poured. Poirot's gaze lingered on the butler for a moment, before turning to the others. "I understand that Monsieur Davenheim was last seen at 6 o'clock yesterday evening, in the library. I would hear from each of you where you were between 6 and 7, when the maid discovered the situation." A murmur rippled through the room, and Hastings noted the quick glances exchanged among the guests. Mr. Grayson, the barrister, spoke first, his tone clipped and precise. "I was on the terrace, as were most of us. Mrs. Davenheim had organised a small gathering to enjoy the sunset. I recall speaking with Miss Carver about her recent trip to Monte Carlo. We were there until the maid's cry interrupted us." Miss Carver nodded, her delicate features tense. "That's correct. I was with Mr. Grayson, and I believe Dr. Whitby was nearby, examining the roses." Dr. Whitby, his face lined with fatigue, confirmed this. "Indeed, I was on the terrace, though I confess I was distracted by a particularly fine specimen of Rosa gallica. I didn't notice anything unusual until the commotion began." Mr. Langston, the American industrialist, leaned back in his chair, his voice booming. "Well, I was right there with them, enjoying a cigar and..." Watching Poirot closely, recognized the glint in his friend's eyes, a sign that the little grey cells were already at work. Poirot rose, his movements deliberate, and addressed the room. "I shall inspect the grounds this morning, and then I will speak with each of you privately. Do not leave the estate, s'il vous plaît. The truth, it is here, and Hercule Poirot will find it." As the guests dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the terrace, where the morning air was crisp and fragrant with dew. Poirot paused by the French windows, his gaze fixed on the gravel path leading to the garden. "What do you make of it, Hastings?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. "It's a queer business," Hastings replied, frowning. "Davenheim was in the library, locked away, and then, poof, gone, with blood left behind. The safe's empty, so robbery seems likely, but how did they get in and out without being seen? The terrace was full of people." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "The terrace, mon ami, is both a stage and a screen. It shows us what we are meant to see and hides what we are not. Come, let us walk." They followed the path around the house, Poirot's eyes darting from the ground to the windows, pausing occasionally to examine a blade of grass or a scuff in the gravel. At the edge of the lawn, where the path curved toward a small ornamental pond, he stopped abruptly, crouching to inspect a patch of earth. "Regardez, Hastings. A footprint, faint but distinct. A man's shoe, size 9, I should say, and recently made." Hastings peered over his shoulder, impressed as always by Poirot's attention to detail. "Could it be Davenheim's?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, straightening, "but it is curious, no? The path is well trodden, yet this print is isolated, as if someone stepped carefully to avoid notice. We shall see." As they returned, restless, their faces guarded, Poirot had insisted on interviewing each person individually, a method he described as essential to separating the truth from the performance. His first subject was Mrs. Cecilia Davenheim, who entered the room with the grace of a woman accustomed to scrutiny, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of apprehension. "Madame Davenheim," Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding, "I thank you for your time. Let us speak plainly. Your husband, he was a man of great wealth, oui? And wealth, it attracts envy, resentment, perhaps even betrayal. Tell me, who might have wished him harm?" Mrs. Davenheim's lips parted, then closed, as if weighing her words. "Philip was a private man, Monsieur Poirot. His business dealings were complex, and not everyone approved of his methods. But harm? I cannot imagine anyone here capable of such a thing." Poirot's eyes gleamed, catching the hesitation in her voice. "And yet, madame, someone has acted. The blood, the open safe, the disappearance. These are not the work of a ghost. Tell me of your husband's state of mind these past days. You said he was tense." She nodded, her fingers tightening around her handkerchief. "Yes, he was preoccupied, more so than usual. He spent hours in the library, poring over documents. He mentioned a deal, a significant one, but he wouldn't share details, even with me." Poirot made a note, his pen scratching softly. "And at 6 o'clock, when you spoke to him through the library door, what did he say?" "He said he was not to be disturbed," she replied. His voice was sharp, almost angry. I assumed he was under pressure from his work. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "And you heard nothing else?" No other voice, no sound of movement. She shook her head. "Nothing. I returned to the terrace at once." "Bon," Poirot said, though his tone suggested he was— "You are a man of the law, oui? You understand motive, opportunity, means. Tell me, what was your relationship with Monsieur Davenheim?" Grayson's lips curved in a faint smile. "Purely professional. Philip was a client of my firm. I advised him on several investments, though I must say his decisions were often unorthodox." "Unorthodox?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "In what way?" "He took risks," Grayson said, choosing his words carefully. "Bold ones. Some paid off handsomely. Others, well, there were losses. Not everyone was pleased with his success. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And you, monsieur? Were you pleased?" Grayson's smile tightened. "I was paid for my services, Monsieur Poirot. My personal feelings are irrelevant." Poirot made another note, his eyes never leaving Grayson's face. "And at 6 o'clock yesterday you were on the terrace, discussing Monte Carlo with Mademoiselle Carver?" "Yes," Grayson said. "We were there until the maid's cry." Poirot nodded, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. As Grayson left, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "A man who speaks much but says little. His alibi is convenient, but convenience, it is the enemy of truth." The interviews continued. Miss Evelyn Carver, the heiress, was nervous, her fingers twisting a pearl bracelet as she spoke of her admiration for Davenheim's financial acumen, though she admitted to a recent disagreement over a shared investment. Dr. Harold Whitby, the physician, was reserved, claiming ignorance of Davenheim's affairs, but admitting to a fascination with the estate's rare plants, which had kept him on the terrace. Mr. Victor Langston, the American, was brash, insisting he had no quarrel with Davenheim, but revealing a failed business venture that had soured their acquaintance. The servants were questioned last. Mr. Simmons, the butler, was visibly shaken. The key to this mirage. As they left the morning room, Hastings felt a familiar thrill, the certainty that Poirot's little grey cells were already unravelling the mystery of Davenheim Hall, one subtle contradiction at a time. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The midday sun bathed Davenheim Hall in a deceptive calm, its golden light filtering through the library's French windows, where Hercule Poirot stood, his hands clasped behind his back. The room, still sealed off by Constable Perkins' orders, was untouched since the previous evening, the bloodstain on the Persian rug now a dull, accusing brown. Captain Hastings watched as Poirot paced slowly, his eyes darting from the open safe to the smudged brandy glass, then to the faint indentation in the rug. The little Belgian's movements were deliberate, almost theatrical, as if he were performing for an invisible audience. "Hastings, mon ami," Poirot said, pausing by the desk. "The stage is set, but the actors, they play their parts too well. Everyone has an alibi. Everyone is shocked. And yet, the truth, it hides behind these perfect performances. We must look for the red herring, the distraction that leads the hounds astray." Hastings frowned, his military mind struggling to keep pace. "You mean someone's deliberately misleading us?" "But who? They all seemed genuinely shaken by Davenheim's disappearance." Poirot's moustache twitched in a faint smile. "Genuine, you say?" "Emotion. It can be a mask, Hastings. Let us consider the facts. The blood. It is not enough for murder, yet it is there to suggest violence. The safe, it is open but not forced. The papers scattered, but nothing of value remains. It is all too convenient, no?" Before Hastings could respond, Constable Perkins bustled into the room, his face flushed with excitement. "Mr. Poirot, sir, we've—" Draw our eyes from the truth. Back in the library, the discovery of the shoe had sent ripples of speculation through the household. The guests, summoned by Mrs. Davenheim, gathered in the drawing room, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Constable Perkins, eager to assert his authority, announced the find with a flourish, prompting a gasp from Miss Evelyn Carver. "A shoe? With blood?" she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Then it's true. Someone attacked poor Mr. Davenheim." Mr. Victor Langston, the American, snorted. "Or he staged it himself. Davenheim's no fool. Maybe he's run off with the cash from that safe,
and left us all to squabble over his mess." Mrs. Davenheim's eyes flashed with indignation. "How dare you, Mr. Langston? My husband would never abandon his responsibilities." Langston shrugged, unperturbed. "Just saying what everyone's thinking, ma'am. Man's got enemies, and that safe wasn't exactly Fort Knox." Poirot, who had been observing the exchange in silence, raised a hand for calm. "Mesdames et messieurs, let us not leap to conclusions. The shoe, it is a clue, oui, but it is not the story. Monsieur Langston, you speak of enemies. Who precisely do you mean?" Langston hesitated, his bravado faltering under Poirot's piercing gaze. "Well, nobody specific. Just, a man like Davenheim, swimming with sharks in the city, he's bound to make a few folks sore." Poirot's smile was thin. "And you, monsieur? Were you sore?" Langston's face reddened. "Now see here, I didn't mean—" "Enough," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I observe, I listen, and I note. Each of you has a story, but not all stories are true. Monsieur Grayson, you advised Monsieur Davenheim on his investments."
Unsettled without raising his voice. As the guests dispersed, Poirot beckoned Hastings to the library. "What do you make of it, mon ami?" he asked, his tone deceptively light. "That shoe's got everyone rattled," Hastings said. "Langston's theory about Davenheim running off, it's possible, isn't it? The empty safe, the blood, the shoe, it could all be a setup." Poirot shook his head. "Possible, oui, but too simple. The truth, it is more complex, more elegant. The shoe is a distraction, meant to make us chase shadows. But the real clue, Hastings, lies in what we have not yet seen. The smudged glass, the moved chair, the untouched papers, these are the threads of the tapestry." He paused, his eyes gleaming with purpose. "Come, we must examine the servants' quarters. The butler, Simmons, his hands shook when he poured my tea, fear, perhaps, or guilt. And the maid, Ellen, she knows more than she says. The red herrings multiply, but Hercule Poirot will not be misled." As they left the library, the clock chimed 1, its notes echoing through the silent house. The mystery of Philip Davenheim's disappearance deepened, and Hastings knew that Poirot's little grey cells were already weaving the scattered clues into a pattern only he could see. A clue in detail. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of Davenheim Hall, casting intricate shadows across the polished floors. Hercule Poirot, his demeanour as precise as ever, led Captain Hastings through the servants' quarters, a labyrinth of narrow corridors and modest rooms tucked behind the grand facade of the estate. The air here was cooler, tinged with the faint scent of polish and starch, and the silence was broken only by the distant clatter of pots from the kitchen. Poirot's mission was clear: to probe the unseen corners of the household, with his eyes narrowing. The lenses, they are not for reading or distance, but for close work, perhaps for examining fine print or intricate objects. And yet, Madame Davenheim did not mention her husband requiring such aid. Most curious, Hastings. Ever practical? Venture to guess. Could it belong to one of the servants? Simmons, perhaps? Poirot shook his head. No, the monogram is clear. This belongs to Monsieur Davenheim, or someone wishes us to believe it does. Come, let us speak with the butler. They found Mr. Simmons in the pantry, polishing silver with a nervous intensity. His hand, still trembling slightly, paused as Poirot entered, the spectacles case dangling casually from his fingers. "Monsieur Simmons," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. This was found in the servants' hall. Do you recognize it? Simmons' eyes widened, and he set down the silver tray with a clatter. That's Mr. Davenheim, sir. I've seen him use it when working on his ledgers, but I swear I don't know how it got there. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And yet, it was beneath your jacket, monsieur. You were in the servants' hall between 6 and 7 yesterday evening, oui? Tell me, did you enter the library at any time? Simmons shook his head vehemently. No, sir. I was here, with Ellen and Mrs. Baxter, as I told you. I never went near the library. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. Bon, we shall see. And the maid, Ellen, where is she now? Simmons gestured toward the kitchen. She's helping Mrs. Baxter with luncheon, sir. They found Ellen, a young woman with a pale, pinched face, peeling carrots with mechanical precision. Her eyes darted nervously as Poirot approached, the spectacles case still in his hand. Mademoiselle Ellen, he said, you discovered the library empty at 10 minutes to 7. Tell me precisely what you saw when you entered. Ellen's hands stilled, the knife trembling slightly. It was empty, sir. Spectacles case. It begins to form a picture, no?
Hastings frowned, struggling to follow. You think someone drugged Davenheim? But why leave the spectacles case in the servants' hall? It's almost as if it was planted. Précisément, Poirot said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. A detail left to mislead, or perhaps to accuse. But who would wish to implicate the servants? Or is it Monsieur Davenheim himself who plays a deeper game? They returned to the library, where Poirot once again examined the brandy glass, sniffing it carefully. Oui, there it is, a faint trace, not of brandy alone, but of something else. Chloral hydrate, perhaps, or another sedative. The glass is smudged on one side, as if held by someone unaccustomed to its weight. And the spectacles case, found so conveniently, it is a clue that points too loudly. Hastings, catching the thread, ventured, You think someone's trying to frame Simmons or Ellen? But why? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. The why, mon ami, is always tied to the who. The spectacles case, the blood, the shoe by the pond, these are not random. They are pieces of a puzzle, and the puzzle is a mind. We must look closer at the guests, their motives, their secrets. Someone in this house knows more than they say, and Hercule Poirot will uncover it. As they left the library, the clock in the hall struck 2, its chimes echoing through the silent house. The discovery of the spectacles case had deepened the mystery, and Hastings could sense the web of deception tightening around Davenheim Hall. Poirot's little grey cells were at work, piecing together the subtle contradictions that would lead them to the truth. Chapter 7. More Lies Surface. The atmosphere in Davenheim Hall had grown taut as a bowstring, each passing hour tightening the strain among its inhabitants. The discovery of the spectacles case in the servants' hall had sent whispers rippling through the house, and the guests' polished
Here this morning, Hastings. And yet, it is familiar, no? Hastings frowned, peering at the case. It looks expensive. Could it belong to one of the guests? Grayson, perhaps? He's the sort to carry something like that. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps, mon ami. But let us test this hypothesis. We shall summon Monsieur Grayson and see what he reveals. Leonard Grayson entered the room with his usual air of calculated composure, but his eyes flickered briefly to the cigarette case in Poirot's hand. You wish to see me, Monsieur Poirot? He asked, his tone smooth but guarded. Oui, Monsieur Grayson, Poirot replied, holding up the case. This was found in the morning room, a place where you and the others have spent much time. It is yours, I presume? Grayson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes, it's mine. I must have left it here earlier. Is there a problem? Poirot's smile was disarming, but his eyes were relentless. No problem, monsieur. But a question. You see, this case, it bears a small scratch on the hinge. A scratch that matches one I observed on a cigarette case in Monsieur Davenheim's library yesterday, before his disappearance. How curious, no? That it should now appear here. Grayson's composure faltered, his fingers twitching at his side. I don't know what you mean. I often visited Philip in the library to discuss business. I might have left it there by mistake. By mistake, Poirot repeated, his voice soft but piercing. And yet, you did not mention visiting the library yesterday, when you claimed to be on the terrace from 6 to 7. A small omission, perhaps, but significant. Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, what was the nature of your last conversation with Monsieur Davenheim? Grayson hesitated, his eyes darting to Hastings, then back to Poirot. It was a disagreement, nothing more. Philip was planning a risky venture, and I advised against it. He didn't take kindly to my caution. Entered the room, her delicate features drawn with tension. She sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her pearl bracelet glinting in the afternoon light. Poirot, ever courteous, offered her a seat before beginning. "Mademoiselle," he said, "you spoke of a disagreement with Monsieur Davenheim over an investment. Tell me more. What was the nature of this dispute?" Miss Carver's lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "It was a private matter, Monsieur Poirot. Philip convinced me to invest in a venture, a mining company in South America. He promised great returns, but the company failed and I lost a significant sum. I confronted him about it 2 days ago here at the hall." "And his response?" Poirot pressed, his eyes fixed on hers. "He was apologetic," she said, her gaze dropping to her hands. "He promised to make it right to cover my losses, but he seemed distracted, as if something else was weighing on him." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Distracted, you say? And when was this conversation?" "Late afternoon, the day before he vanished," she replied, "in the drawing room. Others were present, Mrs. Davenheim, Dr. Whitby." Poirot made a note, his pen scratching softly. "And yesterday, between 6 and 7, you were on the terrace, oui? Did you see Monsieur Grayson leave at any point?" Miss Carver hesitated, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. I don't recall. We were all talking, moving about. I wasn't watching him closely." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As she left, Hastings leaned closer. "She's nervous, Poirot. And Grayson's story doesn't hold up. Do you think they're in this together?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Together or apart, they are entangled, Hastings. The cigarette case, the financial disputes, the medicinal scent in the glass, these are not isolated threads. They weave a pattern, and soon we shall see." Room like a physical weight, each guest's glance and gesture laden with suspicion. Poirot had called this meeting with deliberate intent, his announcement delivered with the calm authority that was his hallmark. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "The disappearance of Monsieur Davenheim is no simple matter. The clues, the blood, the shoe, the spectacles case, the cigarette case. They point not to chaos, but to a design. And in that design, someone in this room holds a truth they have not yet shared." A ripple of unease passed through the group. Mrs. Cecilia Davenheim, seated on a velvet settee, clutched her handkerchief, her face pale but resolute. Mr. Leonard Grayson's jaw tightened, his fingers brushing the edge of his cufflinks. Miss Evelyn Carver's eyes darted nervously, while Dr. Harold Whitby stared fixedly at the floor. Mr. Victor Langston, ever the outlier, leaned back in his chair, his expression a mix of defiance and unease. Poirot's gaze settled on Mrs. Davenheim. "Madame," he said softly, "you have told us of your husband's tension, his preoccupation with business. But there is more, oui? A secret, perhaps, that weighs upon you?" Mrs. Davenheim's composure wavered, her lips trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, I don't know what you mean." "I've told you everything." Poirot's eyes softened. but his voice was unrelenting. "Non, madame. The heart. It speaks even when the lips are silent. Your husband. He was not merely tense. He was afraid, was he not? Afraid of someone, or something, here in this house." A gasp escaped Miss Carver, and all eyes turned to Mrs. Davenheim. Her hands shook, and for a moment it seemed she might deny it. Then, with a sudden choking sob, she broke.
Grayson's face reddened, but before he could respond, Miss Carver stood, her voice trembling but resolute. "Enough! I can't bear this any longer. Monsieur Poirot, I wasn't entirely truthful. My disagreement with Philip, it wasn't just about the investment. He made promises to me. Promises he didn't keep. I was angry, yes, but I didn't harm him." Poirot's eyebrows rose, his expression one of quiet triumph. "Promises, mademoiselle? Of what nature?" Miss Carver's cheeks flushed, and she looked away. "Personal promises. He said he cared for me, that he would make things right. But then he grew distant, and I heard rumors of another woman." A collective murmur rose from the group, and Mrs. Davenheim's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "Another woman? That's a lie! Philip was devoted to me." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. "Calm yourselves, s'il vous plaît. The truth, it emerges slowly, like a picture developing in the darkroom. Mademoiselle Carver, when did you last speak to Monsieur Davenheim about these promises?" "The afternoon before he vanished," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "In the drawing room. He was agitated, said he couldn't talk. I thought he was brushing me off." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled before him. "And you, Dr. Whitby? You have been silent, yet your eyes, they see much. Did you observe anything unusual that afternoon?" Whitby, startled, adjusted his glasses. I was in the garden, as I said, but yes, I saw Mr. Davenheim leave the drawing room after speaking with Miss Carver. He looked unwell, almost frightened. He headed toward the library and didn't come out." Poirot's gaze sharpened. Scent of roses. Hastings felt the mystery tightening its grip. The emotional cracks in the guests' stories had revealed new depths. But the heart of the mirage remained hidden, waiting for Poirot's genius to bring it into the light. Chapter 9. The Trap. The twilight cast a soft, violet hue over the terrace of Davenheim Hall. The air, heavy with the scent of roses and the promise of an approaching storm. Hercule Poirot stood by the French windows of the library, his small frame silhouetted against the fading light, his eyes fixed on the gravel path beyond. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, sensed a shift in his friend's demeanor, a quiet intensity that signaled the hunt was nearing its climax. Poirot had declared his intention to gather the household once more. Not for questions, but for what he called a little experiment in psychology. "Mon ami," Poirot said, turning to Hastings. "The time has come to tighten the net. The clues, the blood, the shoe, the spectacles case, the cigarette case, the medicinal scent. They are pieces of a mosaic, but it is the human heart, with its fears and desires, that will reveal the artist behind this mirage." Hastings frowned, his mind racing to keep pace. "You mean to confront them all? But what do you hope to provoke?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A reaction, Hastings. The guilty,
They cannot resist the pressure of the truth when it is pressed close. Watch, and you shall see. The drawing room was crowded with tension. As the guests and servants assembled, their faces a mix of apprehension and defiance. Mrs. Cecilia Davenheim sat rigidly, her handkerchief crumpled in her hand. Mr. Leonard Grayson's sharp features were set in a mask of cool detachment, while Miss Evelyn Carver's eyes darted nervously, her pearl bracelet glinting as she fidgeted. Dr. Harold Whitby clutched a teacup, his medicinal scent, a trace of chloral hydrate. A murmur rippled through the room, and Mrs. Davenheim's hand flew to her throat. Chloral hydrate? You mean poison? Not poison, madame, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. A sedative, perhaps, to render a man helpless. But for what purpose? To rob him? To abduct him? Or to stage a disappearance? Langston snorted, his voice brash. You're saying Davenheim faked it? Ran off with his own cash? That's rich. Poirot's gaze turned to him, sharp as a blade. Is it, Monsieur Langston? You, who lost a fortune in a failed venture with Monsieur Davenheim. Did you seek to recover it? Langston's face reddened. Now see here, I didn't touch him. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. And you, Monsieur Grayson, you were in the library, despite your claim to the terrace. Your cigarette case betrays you. What did you discuss with Monsieur Davenheim? A deal that threatened your reputation? Grayson's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent. Poirot turned to Miss Carver. Mademoiselle, your broken promises with Monsieur Davenheim, they cut deeply, no? Deep enough to act? Miss Carver's voice trembled. I was angry, yes, but I didn't harm him. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Whitby. And you, doctor, with your knowledge of plants, and perhaps of sedatives, the chloral hydrate, it is within your expertise, oui? Whitby's teacup rattled in its saucer. I'm a physician, not a criminal. Poirot's smile was thin. And yet, someone in this room knows more than they say. Let us consider a possibility. Monsieur Davenheim was not taken, but left. The blood, it is too little for murder. The shoe, too conveniently placed. The spectacles case, left to implicate the servants. This is a performance, mes amis, and I, Hercule Poirot, will pull back the curtain. He stepped forward. Mes amis, a shadow, a sedative, a staged scene. Someone in this house has woven a clever web, but Hercule Poirot sees through it. Tomorrow we shall gather again, and the truth will be revealed. As the guests dispersed, their faces pale with shock, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. Good heavens, Poirot, you've rattled them all. That shadow Ellen saw, do you think it's the key? Poirot's smile was serene. The shadow, mon ami, is a clue, but the truth lies in the motives. Fear, greed, betrayal. One of these has driven our culprit. Tomorrow we shall see their face. As the storm clouds gathered over Davenheim Hall, Hastings felt the weight of the trap closing. Poirot's genius poised to unravel the mirage that had ensnared them all. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The storm that had threatened Davenheim Hall broke with a vengeance, rain lashing the windows as thunder rumbled in the distance. The drawing room, lit by the soft glow of lamps, was filled with an oppressive silence as the household gathered for what Hercule Poirot had promised would be the unveiling of the truth. The guests sat in a tense semicircle, their faces pale and drawn, while the servants hovered near the door, their eyes wide with apprehension. Captain Hastings, seated near Poirot, felt his heart pound with anticipation, knowing his friend's penchant for dramatic revelations. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame radiating authority, his mustache impeccably groomed, despite the gravity of the moment. He clasped his hands behind his back, his bright eyes sweeping the room, lingering on each face as if reading the secrets etched within. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice clear and resonant, the disappearance of Monsieur Philip Davenheim is no ordinary mystery. It is a mirage, a carefully crafted illusion designed to deceive. But Hercule Poirot, he does not chase shadows. With the little gray cells, I have pieced together the truth And now I shall reveal it. A murmur rippled through. Blood. It wasn't enough for murder. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. The blood, madame, was a distraction, a small amount to suggest struggle. The real method was the chloral hydrate in the brandy glass. Monsieur Davenheim was drugged, rendered unconscious, and then killed, quietly, efficiently, and moved from the library to conceal the crime. Miss Evelyn Carver's voice trembled. Moved? But where? There was no body. Poirot's gaze turned to her, sharp and unrelenting. Patience, mademoiselle. Let us walk through the events. The library was the stage, but the French windows, they were the key. They were ajar, yet no footprints marked the terrace. Why? Because the body was not carried out, but hidden within the house. A collective gasp rose, and Mr. Victor Langston leaned forward, his cigar forgotten. Hidden? You're saying he's still here? Poirot nodded. Oui, monsieur. But first, the motive. Monsieur Davenheim was a man of wealth, but also of secrets. He was afraid, as Madame Davenheim revealed, of someone close who knew too much. And you, Mademoiselle Carver, spoke of broken promises, of a personal betrayal. Monsieur Grayson, you disagreed with his risky ventures. Dr. Whitby, you observed his fear. And Monsieur Langston, you lost a fortune because of him. Each of you had reason to wish him harm. Grayson's voice was icy. That's speculation, Poirot. You've no proof. Poirot's smile was serene. Proof, monsieur? It lies in the details. The spectacles case found in the servants' hall was meant to implicate Monsieur Simmons. But why was it there? Because the killer needed a scapegoat. The cigarette case, yours, Monsieur Grayson, places you in the library, despite your alibi. And the shadow Mademoiselle Ellen saw, it was not Monsieur Davenheim, but the killer, moving to the garden to plant the shoe. He turned to Dr. Whitby, who's cut. Staged to mislead. The shoe, the spectacles case, these were distractions. But the cigarette case, Monsieur Grayson, and your lie about the terrace, they betray you. You were in the library. You knew of the panel, a secret Davenheim shared with you, his advisor. And you, Dr. Whitby, provided the sedative, knowingly or not, in a conspiracy born of greed and fear. Grayson stood, his face livid. This is nonsense. You can't prove it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The proof, monsieur, is in your cigarette case, smudged with chloral hydrate residue, and in the garden, where your footprint matches the one near the pond. You and Dr. Whitby acted together, Grayson to kill, Whitby to supply the means, both to profit from Davenheim's wealth. Whitby collapsed, sobbing, while Grayson's defiance crumbled. He was ruining us, Whitby whispered. His deals, they were fraudulent. We had to stop him. Poirot nodded, his expression one of quiet triumph. And so you did. But Hercule Poirot sees through the mirage. As Constable Perkins moved to restrain the two men, Hastings stared in awe. Good Lord, Poirot. How did you know? Poirot's smile was serene. The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what the eyes miss. The storm raged outside, but within Davenheim Hall, the truth had been laid bare. The mirage shattered by Poirot's relentless logic. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The storm had passed, leaving Davenheim Hall bathed in the soft, pale light of a new morning. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and the faint perfume of roses from the garden. The household, still reeling from the dramatic revelation of the previous evening, moved with a subdued quiet, as if the walls themselves mourned the tragedy unveiled. Hercule Poirot sat in the morning room, his small frame ensconced in a high-backed chair, a cup of tisane.
I suppose I am, Poirot. It's just, it was so intricate, so calculated. Grayson and Whitby, they planned it so carefully, yet you saw through it all. The spectacles case, the cigarette case, the chloral hydrate, how did you know where to look? Poirot set down his cup,
his fingers steepled before him. "The method, Hastings, is always the same. The little gray cells, they observe, they compare, they deduce. The clues, they were not random. The spectacles case in the servants' hall, it was placed to cast suspicion on Monsieur Simmons. The cigarette case, smudged with chloral hydrate, betrayed Monsieur Grayson's presence in the library. The blood, too little for murder, suggested a staging. And the shoe by the pond, it was a distraction, meant to draw us outward when the truth lay within." Hastings nodded, still marveling. "And the hidden panel behind the bookcase, how did you find it?" Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "The chair, mon ami. Its indentation was too deep, as if it had borne a great weight or been moved to conceal something. I examined the bookcase, and there it was, a false panel, just large enough to hide a body and the stolen cash. Monsieur Davenheim, drugged and strangled, was placed there by Grayson, with Whitby's aid in supplying the sedative. Their motive, greed, fear of exposure, drove them to act, but their cleverness was their undoing." Hastings shook his head, a rueful smile playing on his lips. "You make it sound so simple, Poirot, but it was anything but. The way you pressed them last night, forcing the truth out, it was like watching a chess master checkmate an opponent." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "The human heart, Hastings. It is a complex thing, but it cannot hide from logic." Grayson and Whitby, they underestimated the power of observation.
Ellen and Mrs. Baxter stood waiting, their faces a mix of gratitude and awe. Simmons, his hands steady for the first time, offered a deep bow. "Thank you, Mr. Poirot, sir. You've brought justice to this house." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching with a faint smile. "Justice, monsieur, is the balance of truth. Au revoir." They left Davenheim Hall, the gravel crunching underfoot as they made their way to the waiting car. The estate, so recently a stage for deception, stood silent behind them, its secrets laid bare. Hastings glanced back, feeling a pang of melancholy, but Poirot's step was light, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The mirage of Davenheim Hall had been dispelled, and in its place stood the clarity of truth, crafted by the unrelenting logic of Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Davenheim Hall, shrouding the estate in a veil of quiet melancholy. The storm's aftermath had left the air fresh, but the weight of the previous night's revelations lingered, casting a pall over the household. Hercule Poirot, his valise packed and his demeanor as impeccable as ever, stood in the entrance hall, adjusting his gloves with meticulous care. Captain Hastings, beside him, felt a mix of relief and unease, the resolution of the case leaving behind a residue of unanswered questions about the human cost of such a crime. The servants had gathered to bid them farewell, their faces etched with gratitude and exhaustion. Mrs. Cecilia Davenheim, dressed in mourning black, emerged from the drawing-room, her composure restored but her eyes shadowed with grief. She approached Poirot, her voice soft but steady. "Monsieur Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. You have brought clarity to this darkness, though it is a painful truth." Poirot bowed, his expression one of quiet sympathy. "Madame, the truth, it is often painful." Retreated. All these secrets, Grayson's greed, Whitby's complicity, Davenheim's hidden fears. It's as if the house itself was built on lies. Poirot's moustache twitched in a faint smile. "Oui, mon ami, but lies, they cannot stand forever. The house, it is merely stone and mortar. It is the people within who weave the web, and it is the little grey cells that unravel it." They stepped outside, the gravel crunching underfoot as they approached the waiting car. Mr. Victor Langston, his brash demeanor subdued, stood by the drive, his hat in hand. "Mr. Poirot, Captain," he said, his voice gruff. "I reckon I misjudged you. Thought you were just some fancy detective, but you got to the bottom of this. Davenheim and I had our differences, but he didn't deserve this." Poirot inclined his head. "Monsieur, differences are the spice of life, but betrayal, it is poison. You are free of suspicion, and that is enough." As the car pulled away, Hastings glanced back at Davenheim Hall, its golden stone now muted by the mist. "Do you think they'll recover, Poirot? Mrs. Davenheim, Miss Carver, the others?" Poirot's gaze was distant, his voice thoughtful. "Recovery, Hastings. It is a journey, not a destination. They will carry the scars, but they will also carry the truth. And the truth, it has a way of healing, even if it stings." The car wound through the Kentish countryside, the rolling hills a stark contrast to the turmoil they left behind. Hastings leaned back, his mind replaying the case. The bloodstain, the spectacles case, the cigarette case, the hidden panel. "You know, Poirot, I thought for a moment Davenheim might have staged his own disappearance. That shoe by the pond, the open safe, it seemed so plausible." Poirot chuckled softly. "A natural thought." Unseen threads. The train to London rattled through the countryside, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil left behind at Davenheim Hall. Hercule Poirot sat in a first-class compartment, his small frame nestled against the plush upholstery, his eyes half-closed as he sipped a cup of tea, provided by the attentive porter. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, gazed out the window at the passing fields, their golden hues softened by the late morning light. The resolution of the Davenheim case had brought closure, yet Hastings felt a lingering disquiet, as if some threads of the mystery remained tantalizingly out of reach. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, breaking the comfortable silence. "You've explained the how and the who, Grayson and Whitby, the chloral hydrate, the hidden panel, but there's something nagging at me. Why go to such lengths to stage a disappearance? Why not simply kill Davenheim and leave the body?" Poirot opened his eyes, his gaze sharp and thoughtful. "Mon ami, you touch upon the heart of the matter. The staging, it was not merely to deceive, it was to control. Grayson and Whitby, they sought not only to eliminate Monsieur Davenheim, but to shape the narrative. A disappearance suggests flight, scandal, perhaps even guilt on Davenheim's part. A body, it demands investigation, points fingers. By hiding the body, they hoped to muddy the waters, to buy time to secure their gains." Hastings frowned, his mind turning over the details. But the spectacles case in the servants' hall, why implicate Simmons? He had no motive, no connection to Davenheim's business. Poirot's moustache twitched in a faint smile. "Précisément, Hastings. The spectacles case, it was a clumsy touch, a miscalculation. Grayson, he is a man of law, accustomed to manipulating evidence, but he underestimated the simplicity of the servant's loyalty. Distraction." Poirot's expression softened. "No, mon ami. Mademoiselle Carver's pain, it was real. Her broken promises, her anger, they were threads in the tapestry, but not the central design. Davenheim's charm, it ensnared her, but her role was that of a witness, not a conspirator. Her truth helped expose the fear that drove Grayson and Whitby to act." The train whistle sounded, signaling their approach to a small station. Poirot set down his teacup,
his demeanor serene. "This case, Hastings, it reminds us that truth is not always in the grand gesture. The unseen threads, the glance, the hesitation, the misplaced object, these are what reveal the heart of a crime." Hastings nodded, his thoughts drifting to Mrs. Davenheim. "I feel for her, Poirot. To lose her husband, to learn of his betrayal by those he trusted, it's a heavy burden." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice tinged with melancholy. "But Madame Davenheim, she is resilient. The truth, it wounds, but it also frees. She will rebuild, as the human spirit always does." As the train slowed, Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise as ever. "Come, mon ami. London awaits, and with it, new puzzles. The world, it is never short of mysteries for Hercule Poirot to solve." Hastings smiled, his unease easing in the face of his friend's unshakable confidence. The unseen threads of the Davenheim case had been woven into a coherent whole. And though the cost was great, the clarity of Poirot's logic had brought justice to a house shrouded in deception. As the train pulled into the station, the future stretched before them. A canvas of new challenges, waiting to be met by the little grey cells. Chapter 14. The Shadow of Motive. The London-bound train rattled on, its wheels a steady cadence against the backdrop.
Davenheim's success, his secrets, they threatened their own standing, their own sense of control. Hastings frowned, leaning forward. "Pride? You mean they couldn't bear to be outdone by him?" "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant. "Monsieur Grayson, the barrister, he built his reputation on advising men like Davenheim, yet Davenheim's unorthodox methods made him a liability. If Davenheim's fraudulent deals were exposed, Grayson's name would be tarnished. And Dr. Whitby, a man of science, he was drawn into the scheme by his own desperation, debts, perhaps, or the lure of Davenheim's wealth. Together, they saw murder not as a risk, but as a necessity." Hastings shook his head, marveling at the complexity. "And the staging, the shoe, the blood, the spectacles case, it was all to make us think Davenheim had fled?" "Oui," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The mirage. It was designed to mislead. A disappearance suggests scandal, flight, perhaps even guilt on Davenheim's part. It buys time, deflects suspicion. But they did not account for Hercule Poirot. The chloral hydrate in the glass, the cigarette case with its telltale residue, the hidden panel, these were not accidents. They were the threads of their undoing." Hastings leaned back, his mind drifting to the other players in the drama. What about Miss Carver? Her confession about Davenheim's promises, it seemed so personal, so raw. Was she truly just a bystander? Poirot's expression softened. Mademoiselle Carver, she was a victim of Davenheim's charm, but not of his crime. Her anger, her hurt, they were real, but they did not drive her to murder. Her confession, it was a crack in the facade, a moment of truth that helped illuminate the motives of others. She will carry her pain, but she is free of guilt. The train lurched slightly, and hidden behind its grand walls, Poirot chuckled softly. The house, mon ami, it is but a stage. The actors, they bring the drama, and we are the critics who see through the performance to the truth. As the train neared London, its lights flickering in the distance, Poirot leaned back, his demeanor serene. The shadow of motive, Hastings, it drives men to great folly, but it cannot hide from the light of reason. This case, it is closed, but others await. The world, it is never short of shadows for Hercule Poirot to illuminate. Hastings smiled, his admiration for his friend undimmed. The Davenheim case had been a tapestry of deception, woven with threads of greed, fear, and pride. But Poirot's relentless logic had unraveled it, exposing the truth in all its stark clarity. As the train pulled into the station, the future loomed like an open book, its pages filled with mysteries yet to be solved. Chapter 15. The Final Curtain. The London skyline loomed through the train window, its familiar spires and chimneys a stark contrast to the quiet elegance of Davenheim Hall. The journey back to the city had given Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings time to reflect, the rhythmic clatter of the train a backdrop to their thoughts. Poirot sat with his hands folded, his eyes bright with the satisfaction of a case resolved, while Hastings, ever the faithful companion, felt a mix of awe and melancholy as he considered the human toll of the mystery they had unravelled. The compartment was bathed in the soft glow of the evening lamps, and Poirot sipped his final cup of tisane, his demeanour as composed as ever. "Mon ami," he said, breaking the silence, "you are pensive." "The case of Monsieur Davenheim, it has left its mark, no?" Hastings nodded, his gaze fixed on the passing city lights. "It has, Poirot. It's not just the murder, Grayson and Whitby's betrayal, the way they manipulated everyone. It's the ripple effect. Timing, the direction, the context. They all pointed to a deliberate act, not a phantom." Hastings shook his head, marveling. And the chloral hydrate, Whitby's role in supplying it. Did he know Grayson planned to kill Davenheim, or was he just a pawn? Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. Dr. Whitby, he was no innocent, but neither was he the mastermind. His knowledge of sedatives made him useful, but his motive, debts, fear of ruin, made him pliable. Grayson, the barrister, he was the architect. His cigarette case, tainted with chloral hydrate, betrayed his hand in the act. Whitby provided the means, but Grayson wielded the intent. The train slowed as it approached Victoria Station, the platform bustling with evening travellers. Poirot adjusted his hat, his movements precise as always. The case. It was a puzzle of human nature, Hastings. Greed, pride, fear. They wove the mirage, but the little grey cells, they saw through it. Hastings smiled, his admiration for his friend unwavering. "You were brilliant, Poirot. The way you pieced it together, the hidden panel, the smudged glass, the staged clues, it was like watching a magician reveal his tricks." Poirot chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling. "No, mon ami, not a magician, a detective. The trick, it is not in sleight of hand, but in the clarity of thought. The truth, it hides, but it cannot escape Hercule Poirot." As they stepped onto the platform, the city's hum enveloped them, a stark reminder of the world beyond Davenheim Hall. The case was closed, its secrets laid bare. But Hastings knew the memory of it would linger. The bloodstain on the rug, the spectacles case in the servants' hall, the shadow by the pond. Each clue had been a thread in Poirot's tapestry, woven with relentless logic into a picture of justice. They hailed a cab, the driver tipping his cap as they